what is the internal fluid friction that is being developed within the fluid. If we are measuring that, that particular property is what we call it as viscosity. Okay. Yesterday we discussed that with a small example. I hope it was clear, right? So it is not only the friction that is happening at the interface between a fluid and a solid. It takes care into account the friction that is, or the resistance that is there with the layers of the fluid. In a solid, we don't have different layers, only one interface, and at the interface we do have the maximum of the frictional or resistance forces. When it comes to shear, when it comes to fluids, we have layer by layer motion, and therefore the complete effect of the resistance, the total effect of the resistance, which may be between fluid to fluid layer resistance or fluid to solid resistance, together we are calling it as viscosity. And Newton has given an expression to measure the viscosity. He mentioned that tau is directly proportional to the velocity difference. That is, the more the velocity, if you are giving, the more the shear force you are giving, the more the velocity of the fluid difference that you can observe. And the higher the thickness of the fluid, that means, let us, a lot of sound is coming. I think someone has to mute their microphone. Someone please check it out. Your microphone is out and there's not sound is coming. So let us say that these are two plates between which we have the fluid. Let us say this is the fluid. And whatever the shear force that you are using, F, over a period of surface area A, over a period of A, surface area A, which is nothing but tau equivalent to shear force per unit area. So the more the shear stress, the more the velocity difference. When it comes to the difference between this here and here, the difference will be more depending on the shear stress. Okay? The more this, the more velocity difference we will have. Similarly, the higher the thickness, the shear stress, the more the shear stress, and the more the thickness, the more the lesser the shear stress effect you are seeing. Okay, so together he has given an expression with a proportionality constant that tau is equivalent to mu into du by dy, where mu is called as the dynamic viscosity. Mu is the dynamic viscosity. And we also have another particular term called nu, which is called the kinematic viscosity. Can anyone tell me what is the use of kinematic viscosity? See, we have dynamic, mu is there, no? Why mu? Which is again divided by kinematic viscosity. Generally, we define kinematic viscosity as mu by rho. So that means when we differentiate, when we divide this with respect to, when we normalize this with respect to density, whatever the property that we are calling is what we call it as mu. This makes easier for us to actually keep the numbers in control. So for keeping the numbers in control, we use mu. Okay. So what are the units of viscosity? We have Newton second per meter square, which is the basic units of viscosity. Okay, and we also measure this nu in terms of poise or centipoise of the fluid. Basically, the dynamic viscosity of the fluid. In other units also we can say that kg per meter second or Pascal second, and if it is in terms of poise also we can say poise or centipoise, which is equivalent to 0.1 kg per meter second. Okay, and alternate unit for kinematic viscosity is Stokes. We generally use that as Stokes, STOKE. This is basically, we talk it in terms of poise or centipoise. Poise or centipoise. Okay. Which is equivalent to 0.1 kg per meter and 2 second. Kg per meter and 2 second. So this is one unit. Whereas Stokes is equivalent to 0.0001 meter square per second. So these are the units of both dynamic viscosity and kinematic viscosity. In general, we will try to find out the dynamic viscosity by different measuring equations. So from that, we will be able to find out the viscosity measurement. Okay, we have out of them, we are using the most relevant topics we are discussing in today's class. So out of the lot, we have three measuring devices which we generally use in engineering, academia, or in industry. The first one is rotating concentric cylinder apparatus, which is one of them. And then we have laminar flow in a capillary. This is another method by which we calculate viscosity, but not very regularly. It is one of the rarest methods. And then the other one is Seybold viscometer. And then we also have Redwood viscometer 1 and Redwood viscometer, which also follows the same methodology or principle of Seybold viscometer. Only the formula that we use, the empirical formula that we use to evaluate the viscosity will change. Apart from that, the methodology will remain same. So Redwood viscometers, we have two types, one Redwood viscometer 1 as well as Redwood viscometer 2. Okay. So these things you can see observed practically in our laboratory when you come for the next semester. So first we will start with the measurement of viscosity by means of a rotating cylinder arrangement. As I told you, the basic principle we are using over here is we are trying to have two surfaces, like this. Okay, two surfaces. Okay, we are trying to have two surfaces, and one of the surfaces is moving by means of a force, shear force or tangential force over a particular unit area. Okay. What is the velocity profile that we will get? Okay, so because of this movement, what happens? There is a velocity gradient that will form, and because of the effect of this force, this one also starts moving. For example, if it also tends to move because of the velocity or shear stress that we applied here, because of its effect, if it starts moving, if I can measure the torque over here, what is the torque that I'm getting over here? Okay, so then we can estimate the whatever called as viscosity. So that is the basic principle of this, what we are using over here. Okay, so what is happening over here? You can see that there are two concentric cylinders. What do you mean by concentric? Over a single axis, we have two cylinders of different radius. That is what we are doing. For both the cylinders, the axis is same. The central axis remains same. The longitudinal axis remains same. So that is what we call it as concentric cylinder. Okay. So we have two concentric cylinders. This is one cylinder of radius R1. This is one cylinder of radius R1. And we also have another cylinder, but there is annular space. This is a space in between. Okay. Between R1 and R2. The cylinders, two cylinders are like this. So this is the annular gap that we have. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to rotate the cylinder, outside cylinder, which whose radius, internal radius is R2. That cylinder we are trying to rotate with a constant angular velocity. We are trying to rotate this angular velocity. So it is a very thin layer, and therefore, if you imagine this particular movement, you can observe that this is also like this, right? So this top layer is moving or rotating. Since it is a very thin layer, you can assume that it is in between two things, like in between two layers. Here it is actually rotating, so that means you can take it as a shear force because the layer is very, very thin. So because of this angular velocity given to the rotating cylinder, because of the viscosity, this internal cylinder of radius r1 also tends to rotate with another velocity, angular velocity, which we call it as, which we try to measure by means of some methodology. What is the torque at which it is rotating? We will try to find out, and based on these two expressions, we will be able to find out the viscosity. Clear? Now, let us come to the mathematical equations which helps us to actually use this particular rotating cylindrical concentric cylinder viscometer. So, torque that is being experienced by the inner cylinder is measured by suitable technique. So, we are assuming that we are able to measure the torque by some measurement technique. So, torque measuring, so many are there. You can use the strain gauges and all. So, with how much torque is being imparted to the inner cylinder because of the rotation of the external cylinder is what we are actually measuring by suitable. So we have torque T. That means shear stress is equivalent to what? Or torque is equivalent to what? Torque is equivalent to force into, or shear force into the momentum R, or arm length, or perpendicular distance, right? Momentum R, or arm length, or perpendicular distance from the point of application. Suppose if there is a bar, if I am applying force, this F into this particular L will give me this particular length will give me the torque. So torque is equivalent to F into by U. So now I am writing this shear force in terms of shear stress. So what I am trying to do is I am trying to write down one area here, A into A. So A and A will get cancelled, and then we will get the same moment of arm. So I've put a numerator and a denominator. Now this will become, this F will become what? This will become tau is equivalent to shear stress into area, surface area of the cylinder into momentum of arm length, moment arm, or the perpendicular distance from the center. Okay, this is the tau into that. Tau is nothing but your shear stress. From Newton's law, what is shear stress? Shear stress is equal to mu into du by dy, correct? Du by dy. Okay, into area into moment arm. So this is what we have got, right? So this one is momentum arm. I will come to you. I will come to your books after this. Mu into du by dy into area into momentum arm. So now, what is the y dy? Here, if you look at, this is the dy, right? So whose value is given as p? This is the p. Okay, here it is given as p. Okay, but what is u? Now, when it is rotating with an angular velocity, if you want to convert that into linear velocity, you know the formula: velocity v is equal to linear velocity v equal to the radius into the angular velocity. So the same thing I have written, omega into r2, because this is the part where actually it is moving. This is the layer of fluid that is there. This one is applying a force of r2, and this one is omega. Okay, so I have put that in the expression like mu into omega r2 by b into, you know, the this area 2 pi r1 into L by r1 into L into what is the radius, where is the momentum length, that is r. So this is what the torque that we are experiencing, correct? So anyhow, we are also measuring the torque from a measurement setup. So torque will be found out. Omega, what velocity, angular velocity we are rotating, we can measure. R2 is a radius, is a geometrical measurement. We can do that. E is a geometrical dimension. R1. So everything is there. So from that, mu can be found. Okay. So what can be observed here is we have taken care that because of these two layers, because of the rotation, because of these two annular spacings, what is the effect of torque we have calculated. But we also have another one at the bottom, this annular spacing at the bottom, which also contributes to the torque. Maybe positive or negative, we will see that. So we have not considered that here. We have only considered this and this length. So now you have to take the annulus of this into account and what is its contribution to the torque. So if I interpret that into this expression, if I have to add this plus this, correct? This plus this. So when I add these two, then only the complete torque, whatever I am measuring, will be balanced. So therefore, now I am trying to find out what is the torque because of this annular spacing A. Okay. So now let shear stress at a radial distance radius r from the center be given by. So it will be given by r omega by the distance is A. Okay. So we know that the shear stress along the radius r, so from the center, whatever be the distance, whatever I am taking, it is increasing. So which is a function of r. So whatever be the length of r, that r you have to keep it here. So I don't know from the center. So how much distance the bottom layer is. So shear stress is a function of that, and therefore whatever the radius that I am giving to the bottom, this side, whatever this is r, so it will become r omega by A. So since it's a variable, I kept it like this. You can if you know that r3, if you want to keep it as r3, you can write omega r3 by A also. You can. So an elemental area in the form of circular strip, if you take the surface area, it will be nothing but 2 pi r dr. Okay, if it's a small area, if you are taking, then it will become 2 pi r dr. Then the elemental torque, whatever the small torque that is being applied in this elemental area, would be dTA. So this is the small change in the torque because of this bottom layer is equivalent to tau r into area. This is nothing but tau into area into momentum, the same thing here. This is moment 2 pi r dr, and momentum one is r, this one.
Hello, sir.
So we have, yeah.
Sir, why we are considering area of inner cylinder? Because like force we are considering at external cylinder, but area we are considering at inner cylinder. Sir,
because you have a fluid, right? What is the area of the fluid that is working on this? So when it is rotating, the bottom layer also experiences, right? So you have to take care of that area also, right? Without the area, how do you take? The bottom layer, when it is rotating, you imagine that this layer is also rotating, right? This top layer. So is rotating compared to the bottom. So when it is rotating, it's like a linear profile again. So you have to take care of this area, right?
Okay, sir.
Understood?
Yes.
So now we have to integrate that with respect to the R1, whatever value that we have got. So at the top layer, I need to find out, because what I have done is I have taken a small strip here, and what is its effect over it for a radius R I have taken. And now I have to evaluate that at the radius of R1. So I'm integrating that with the help of this. So I got this expression. And from the 6 expression, when I add it to the torque total, that is the torque with this plus Ti, these two are Ti plus Ta. What is the torque associated with this? When I add these two, I'll be left with the expression of this nature. So now what I do is I will rotate the outer cylinder with certain angular velocity that I know. And because of this rotation, whichever initially this is filled by the liquid for which I am finding out the viscosity, the annulus is filled with that liquid, and then after some time, because of the rotation of this angular velocity, the inner cylinder also tend to start rotating, and we will measure the inner cylinder rotation or torque by means of some measurement. So now I know torque, omega I know, R1 I know, R2 I know, A and B I know. So the only unknown that I don't know is mu. So I'll be able to find the viscosity, dynamic viscosity. And when I divide that dynamic viscosity by means of a radius, then we call it as kinematic viscosity. So this is one method by which we actually calculate the viscosity by means of this coaxial concentric cylinder method, rotating concentric cylinder method. Now, the second method that we use to measure viscosity is a laminar flow in a capillary. So, laminar flow in a capillary. So, it is basically from the fluid mechanics background. If you remember, when the fluid is laminar in nature, okay, when the fluid is laminar in nature, because of the viscous forces within the fluid, and the principle or the very basic fundamental that the fluid also satisfies the no slip condition at the wall, naturally what happens is the fluid undergoes a change as it moves along the tube. For example, you have a tube, imagine this is a straight tube. So when fluid enters here, because of the viscous forces and friction, what has happening is this fluid tends to have, the fluid layer here is different, the velocity of the fluid layer adhering to the surface is different from the central part. So here it will be free stream velocity u, but at the bottom we will have a zero velocity, right? So what is happening is slowly there is a velocity profile that will start like this, and again from this side it starts. So the boundary layer after certain distance, after the flow moves after certain distance. Now what is this boundary layer suggests? What is this boundary layer, anyone? What is the significance of a boundary layer? It's very important. You should understand this. What is it? It means, hello? At least anybody is there, or I missed the class or what? Hello? Did somebody say yes?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah. So the region in the where the boundary layer grows, in that region we have to consider the viscous forces. That means we have frictional forces more dominant in this particular region. So whatever the region, this is called as inviscid region. That means there are no viscous forces that we could see in this particular region. So whatever region that, yeah.
So is it kind of like a what we can say ideal flow in that region?
What? Which one? This one?
Yes.
Yeah. There is no fluid friction in this particular region. That is what the meaning is. The velocity is same.
Okay, sir.
The velocity is same as the initial velocity, free stream velocity. Only the velocity is affected by the surface, by the presence of surface within this particular. That is the meaning. So how does it help, sir? So you have the Navier-Stokes equations, which are nonlinear in nature earlier. So to simplify them, so we don't need to solve the whole expressions in the whole region. Instead, if we solve them in the boundary layer, that should be enough to get the actual velocity profiles and all. Okay. So it is basically useful for that purpose. You need not solve the boundary layer equation. So those equations will become boundary layer equations. Okay. So we are not solving that in the complete regime, in all the regime. Only in the boundary layer that will be simplified, and when we simplify in the boundary layer, the equation solving those equations becomes simplified. So that we got the different velocity profiles and temperature profiles like that. Temperature profiles is basically solving the Nernst equation, but you will get all the forces and velocities within the fluid. Okay, so after certain time, what happens is both from the top surface, the effect of the top surface and the effect of the bottom surface, it becomes dominant, and finally we get a region where the boundary layer gets merged. So once the boundary layer gets merged, how does it change? That means the velocity here is constant, means my figure is little wrong, you can see here the effect in the starting region. So that means it's going like this now. So the velocity is varying only in this particular region. Okay, the velocity is only. Now here the velocity remains constant. This velocity remains constant. Only it is affecting like this. Okay, here it is 0, it is 0. For example, it is 5 and it is 5. Actual velocity measurement is 6 meters per second, for example. So from here to here, it will remain 6 meters per second. And somewhere here 4, somewhere here 2, somewhere here 1, like that, the velocity will change. But once, as it goes on, the layer where the velocity is changing goes on increasing, correct? You can see like, and then this portion is constant. So after it gets merged, what happens is, whatever the profile that we are getting, it will be unchanged. Unchanged. It remains constant. The velocity profile, only one point we get the maximum. All the other sides we get a symmetrical profile. So the distance of the pipe for which we have a constant velocity profile is what we call it. The distance, initial distance, this is called the developing region. And once we cross the developing region, we get a fully developed profile, fully developed section. Okay, so what is the advantage of the fully developed section? The axial pressure gradient is constant in this part of the flow. So after receiving this, whatever the pressure difference you are seeing from here to outside, it remains constant. The pressure gradient along the axis of the pipe, okay, so P1 minus P2 along the pipe, or once it reaches the pressure gradient, if you look at here to here or here to here, the pressure difference will not be varying, okay, and it is related to the fluid viscosity. Okay, it remains constant, P1 minus P2 remains constant, but it is related to, and this kind of flow we have studied in fluid mechanics, and that discharge equation, we have used this particular expression called discharge equivalent to pi d power 4 P1 minus P2, that is the pressure difference between 2 points, by 128 given. Whatever the pressure gradient at the ends, okay, from the starting to any point to the end, it will remain the same. Okay, so now if I can find out discharge, I can find out from certain measuring device. D is an average, the geometrical measurement, so you can do that with the help of a scale or something. And then if I can measure the length is also a geometrical phenomenon. So if I can find out the pressure difference, which is generally constant, but it also depends on mu. If I can find out P1 minus P2, can I find mu or not? So that is the basic fundamental principle that we are using over here. Okay? So for the important things here is it should be laminar flow. Okay, this phenomena happens in a laminar flow. So therefore, we have to make sure that L by D, so the length of the pipe by the diameter of the pipe should be greater than the Reynolds number based on the diameter. What do you mean by Reynolds number based on the diameter? It is nothing but rho V. Characteristic length can be anything. You can take length or diameter. So it should be based on the diameter of the pipe, rho VD by A. Okay, so whatever L by D you are using, it should be greater than this particular value. Okay, so that is the requirement that ensures that the flow through the pipe is laminar in nature. Clear? So now what we are trying to do is, for creating such a device, what we require a constant amount of flow is required, okay, to be passing through the pipe, and we need a sufficiently long, very low diameter pipe, so that it will resemble us the laminar flow very easily without too much of light. So very small capillary tube I have taken, so that means the diameter of the pipe is very much smaller than the length of the pipe. And we also require to find out the Q value. How do you find Q? So that is also important. So we need three things over here. One thing is constant supply of water. So we need a pump from a sump, and we require the water to be at a constant head, so that if it is not at a constant head, we will not have higher pressure. So we want that water to be moving through the pipe with a higher pressure, so that we will get consistent amount of pressure difference, measurable pressure difference within the pipe. Otherwise, we will not be having P1 minus P2 should be measurable, substantial. If it is 1 mm, 0.5 mm, it's very difficult to measure. So in order to get higher pressure, we keep that tube at a higher height so that it have higher pressure head. Okay, and then we have a pump from the sump. Water is pumped to this tube, and we also have a over tube. Suppose if the exiting pipe water through this pipe is lesser because of a valve or something, will control the flow of water through this pipe, flow of liquid through this pipe. So we always require to have an overflow tube. So whenever it tends to be the input is higher than the output, automatically the water level raises. So in order to keep that water level at a constant level, we have an overflow tube which drains the water to the bottom side. And we also have a rotameter which helps us to measure the discharge of the flow. And we will have some controlling mechanism like a valve or something to control the flow of water. So based on the position of that, we will keep on sending water from the constant head tank through this test capillary. You can see here, we are having a U-tube manometer kind of a device which gives us the differential pressure between 2 points of length L, between 2 points of length L. So the delta P we will get from this. Okay, so we have not keep it here at this particular point because we want the flow to be developed. Only after the developed flow we can measure the pressure difference, at that the axial pressure difference remains constant. Therefore, we have taken the pressure difference at 2 points like this, and then we found out delta P from this expression. We found out Q from the rotameter, and L and D we can measure by suitable linear measuring devices. So after finding all of this, we'll be able to find out. Okay. So that is the working principle of the what we call laminar flow in a pipe. And we are coming to the final thing, which is very interesting and mostly utilized device in academia. In our laboratory, you can see this kind of instruments. So this is helpful for measuring the viscosity of the flow. So we are showing you a viscosity, a viscometer. This kind of meters, we call it as a viscometer, which is shown in here. So what is the principle over here? What we are trying to do here is, it consists of a method which is like measuring the time to drain a fixed volume of the test liquid through a capillary of specified diameters. So we have a capillary tube kind of a thing, okay, and we are keeping certain amount of 60 ml of liquid through it. Okay, we are filling this cup completely, and then what we are trying to do is we are trying to measure the time taken to completely drain this liquid. What is the time taken for the flow for the complete thing, or 60 ml of fluid to completely come out of the liquid? What is the time that it takes? Okay, so that is what we are trying to do. So the test liquid, whatever we are using here, the test liquid, this particular part, this testing liquid, whatever we are having, is surrounded by an outer jacket so that the test fluid can be maintained at the desired temperature. So here here what we are trying to do is we are keeping a liquid which is at a constant temperature. So viscosity is a strong function of temperature. Therefore, when we are measuring the viscosity, we should make an arrangement such that the temperature of the fluid or the liquid for which we are measuring the viscosity should not vary at different points. So therefore, to make sure that the liquid that we are keeping to measure the viscosity will be uniform in its temperature throughout the tube. So therefore, we are keeping an outer jacket which is maintained at a constant temperature. And therefore, when we do the experiment, we will first fill up the complete tube. There will be a ball valve kind of a thing. When we take that means there is, suppose you assume that there is a ball kind of a thing here, and there is a straight pin like this. So this ball will cover this hole. Therefore, whatever the liquid that you will pour will remain this. When you pull this out, when you take this out, there is an opening that comes in. Once that opening comes, you will start the stopwatch and you will measure the time taken for 60 ml of, so from 0 to 60 ml. What is the time taken for the liquid to actually fill this 60 ml of? So that time you are keeping the expression, empirical formula given here. Here you have to observe that this is a kinematic viscosity that is given. So mu you will find out and then multiply that with rho, you will get. Okay, so this is an empirical formula 0.2208 into 18 into T. So this time is what is measured for filling up the 60 ml and minus 179.3 by T, so the time T into 10 power minus 6 meters square per second. This is what we are using for this able instrument. Okay, so if the velocity profile for fully developed, the kinematic viscosity would directly vary with time for drainage. So you can understand that the velocity profile is fully developed within this tube. So it will vary directly. The kinematic viscosity will vary directly with the time. So we have a correction factor that we are using over here in this expression. So which is nothing but we are using mu as a function of C1t plus C2 by t. So we are taking this into account. So from this two factors, C1 and C2, C1 of t plus C2 of t. So where C1 is 0.22018, C2 is minus 179.3. So this is the final expression we have got from particular. Okay. So any doubts up to the viscosity measurement we can discuss? Any particular doubts? We will try to solve out. So two problems are given. So I'll encourage you to go through the problems, and if at all you find out difficulty, you can come back to me. We can easily discuss the problems. Okay. The next topic, can I go ahead? Is it clear, guys? I hope I am not making you bored.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can we just give an introduction? It's 10:45, so another 15 minutes. I'll just try to give you the introduction to the convective heat transfer measurements. So now, so far, whatever we have measured, the transport properties, the thermal conductivity, we understood how to measure it. That is basically related to conduction. As I told you, the conduction is a different mechanism by which heat transfer takes place, predominantly in solids, but it also participates in fluids, which will be accounted in terms of H when it comes to fluids. It is also present, but it will be taken care by H. So we have a fluid. Suppose when there is a bulk fluid motion, over a tube or over a surface. So if the surface temperature of the heater is higher or lower, depending on its relative temperature with the fluid, we may say that whether it is cooling or heating the plate. Okay. For example, if the fluid temperature is high, then we say that compared to the surface, we say that the surface is getting heated up. For example, if the heater surface or the surface temperature is higher than the fluid, then we say that the fluid is cooling the plate. Okay. So how much it is actually, so it is moving with some velocity over the plate. And you generally observe that the more the velocity, the quickly your heat then it gets cooled, the surface gets cooled. Okay. So how much the velocity and this heat transfer rate means with respect to time, how much heat energy is taken. Per second, how much heat is being taken. So how these are dependent. Okay, so the mechanism when there is a bulk fluid motion is involved with the heat transfer. So that means the bulk fluid motion of the fluid is actually the driving force for the heat transfer that takes place. So that mechanism we call it as convection. Okay? This one we call it as convection. And we know that this convection is measured by using a particular term called Q is Newton's law. It is given by Newton, so it is again called as Newton's law of cooling or Newton's law of heating or cooling, because it depends on which side the temperature is higher. So in BME, you have come across this particular expression, Q is equivalent to HA into temperature difference. Okay? Whichever is higher temperature, we will keep that forward, and whichever is lower, we will keep that here. So here we are assuming that the wall surface temperature is higher and the fluid temperature is lower. So now in academia, when we solve problems and all, the thing is, you are expected to find out what is the heat transfer rate. Okay, they will give you the surface temperature. This can be measured by the help of thermocouples. The area with the help of these linear measuring devices or geometrical measuring devices. So you need to estimate H. Okay, you can measure the H. But when it comes to the actual experiment, okay, generally what happens in academia, this H value will be given and you are asked to find out Q. Okay, but when it comes to actual measurements, you are required to find out Q dot, that means heat flux, or heat transfer rate, so not heat flux, heat transfer rate, which is equivalent to H A delta T. As I told you, delta T and A can be measured. These two can be measured. But there are two unknowns. One is Q, another one is H. H is also need to be measured. And remember that H is not a property of the material. It is a function of many factors, like what is the surface roughness, what is the temp of fluid velocity, what regime it is, lamellar or turbulent, based on viscosity and moisture effect of the fluid. So many factors are there. So the whole effect of all of those factors will be taken care by a particular property, which we call it as H. Okay. For the same flow, if there is a rough surface and a smooth surface, then the heat transfer will vary. And either the roughness or the smoothness will be taken care by the H. So even though the fluid, its temperature, its other properties remains constant, if the surface is modified, obviously your H is changing. So therefore it is not a property of the system. Okay? It's a kind of a measurement which depends on many other factors. Okay, so here what is the assumption? We are assuming that whatever the heat that I am giving, it is with neglecting heat losses, and we are making sure that there are no heat losses, which is difficult to do. So that means whatever heat I am giving, it is taken care by this expression. Or if at all I have to write an expression in a general form, Q dot is equivalent to the heat loss, whatever the QL, the amount of heat that is lost to the atmosphere, plus HA delta. This is the actual expression. So here I am assuming that this is negligible or equivalent to 0. So therefore it will become H. Okay. Now to find out H, what can be done in the experimental setups? So how do you find it? From this expression, can any one of you think? Suppose I am giving you a fluid which can be given with certain velocity, which can be blown onto the surface with some velocity, where the velocity can be measured. Okay, and I'm giving you a surface which is heated by a heater. Okay, and then you are expected to find out H. Okay, later for the same setup, if your H, you are taking it as a constant for that value, and then whatever the area and is based on these things, whatever the unknown heat transfer, unknown heat you are supplying, it can be estimated by Q, provided there is no change in any of the other factors. So here Q is the heat supplied by electrical heating, which is generally voltage into current. Area A, capital A, is the heating area, pi dl, where pi D is the inner diameter and L is the length of the tube. PW, tube inner wall temperature, TF, bulk fluid temperature, H is forced convection heat transfer coefficient. What do you mean by bulk fluid temperature? Suppose there is a fluid, do you estimate that the fluid temperature is same at every point? If you measure with the help of a sensor, a temperature measurement device, do you expect that the temperature at this particular point TA and TB is exactly the same, because they are points? They are slightly different. So what we try to do is we are trying to do kind of an averaging, which we call it as the bulk fluid. The average temperature of the fluid is what we are calling it as bulk fluid temperature. So whatever the device that we use, it generally takes care of the average temperature, not the local temperature. So that's why we are keeping it to 3 different places, here, here, and here, and then we are averaging this thing. So that we assume that it is good enough to give the average temperature. So this is one of the example for post-convection heat transfer, a measurement device for measuring the post-convection heat transfer coefficient in this very small tube. So can I ask you to look at this figure, and someone, can you explain me how this heat transfer coefficient measurement will be? I've already given you the inputs. Can any one of you think of what can be the working principle of this? Please try. I'll be very happy if someone is able to think and answer this question. So we have a tube, we have a flow meter, we have an ammeter to measure current, we have high current transformer, and we also have a measurement voltmeter to measure the voltage across this particular tube. We have thermocouples kept on the surface at different points, and a thermocouple is also supplied. So the liquid that is flowing inside is water. So there is an incoming water and there is a outgoing water. Okay, so from this, so this is insulation. The black part is insulation. Okay, so therefore the heat losses from this are estimated to be very low. We have a temperature measuring device T1 and for the incoming flow of water, and then we also have a measurement device for T2. We also have flow meter. So simple force balance you do, whatever the force balance you want to do. So because of this current, what is happening? This surface of this tube is getting heated up. Assume the surface of the tube is getting heated up, and there is resistance. There is this insulation which is not allowing the flow to move in this direction, the top direction, or in the lateral direction. Okay, so therefore, whatever the water that comes in, okay, whatever the water that is coming at a particular temperature T1, okay, whatever it is coming in with a particular temperature T1, will take this energy of the fluid because it is coming with certain velocity. So what is its flow rate, discharge, or whatever it is, mass flow rate? This is basically your discharge is what Q is equivalent to area into velocity. You know the area and you know the velocity of the water from the discharge equation. If you can find out discharge, you can easily measure the flow rate, or you can also, if you multiply that with density, you will get the mass flow rate. Okay, so now the water is coming in and the water is leaving out. So whatever the energy that is given, some of that will be taken by the water, and you also can find out the flow rate. So whatever the water heat that it has taken is measured by mCp delta T, correct? You know that expression, mCp delta T. Okay, so the water has taken certain energy, and we also know the surface temperature of the heater by means of your thermocouple. So your expression, when you look at it, so your expression will become Q is equivalent to HA delta T, TW minus T infinity ambient temperature, plus if there are radiation that you have to take care, you have your Stefan-Boltzmann constant into its emissivity into area, PW4 minus TS4. This is basically an expression from the emissive power when you consider radiation. So radiation will be there when there is no medium at all, and there is a surface temperature, then obviously radiation has to be taken care. But at very low temperatures, this is not very high value. So we generally, at low temperature, we neglect this value. But at slightly higher temperature, since it is a fourth order power, we will consider this expression so that we don't have too many errors in our measurement. So we have Q heat supplied V into I. So here also we are taking that we are having a heat supplied by electric heating V into I, area TW, outer wall temperature T infinity, ambient temperature Ts is surface temperature, surround temperature. So now we know that the water coming Q value we can find out, and Q is also can be found out by MCP delta T, and from that we'll be able to find out Q is equivalent to HA delta T. So all the other things are able to measure, so we can find out H from this expression. So that is the simplest way we will do. So one of the experiment we will carry out with this kind of a setup in our lab. So I will come in detail about this in tomorrow's class. We have only 3 minutes left. So in tomorrow's class, we will finish the convective heat transfer measurement, and then we also look at the calorimetry. Calorimetry also we will try to finish heat capacity measurement, and then calorific value measurement we will try to finish in tomorrow's class. If not tomorrow, whenever you get time before Friday, if you can give me one class, I would like to finish this particular topic. Okay. So with this I am trying to stop for today. Okay. Any questions related to H measurement and viscosity measurement? You're welcome. So those who have other works or other classes, and if you have no doubts, you can leave the session. Those who want to have doubts and clarification, they can stay back and push your questions. I hope things are clear to you. Then can I assume that the things are not clear to you? Clear.
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you. So if you have no doubts, then we will wind up this session for today. And I am actually given the link LMS for the recordings. Please go through them quickly, because next week, Kalyan, you please let me know what date you want to have the minor 2. Before minor 2, I will make sure that your mid papers ready with you. Okay? Please just give me some more time, and I'm correcting them very quickly. I'll give.
Okay.
Apart from that, anything to discuss? Any other thing to discuss? Kalyan, you asked for some time. I will do that. I forgot actually. So I will ask the TA to extend the date today to tomorrow. Okay. So whomever want to resubmit, they can do it very quickly. Only 1 day time I will give you. So quickly finish that. There are some.
Sir, next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kalyan,
Next
tell
week
me.
we have lab exam, sir.
Yes. Lab exam ante last time jarigindi kada skill test madiri.
Skill test.
It is like skill test. I mean, half an hour, 20 bits, and so that's nothing. I think.
Okay.
So from the same experiment only, those things will come up. Need not worry.
Okay.
So just after the lab, you will have at 4:30. You'll have the exam. Okay. So I'll confirm with the professor today. Okay. So after that, all right. Okay. Thanks for attending the class. Any other thing to discuss, or I mean, if you have no other things, I'll try to wind up the session. Okay? Right. Please take care of yourself. I'll take a leave from you.